Today I'm going to talk about transferring your consciousness, extraterrestrial technology, bilocation, and your astral body, and what happens to you after you die. So I want to state, again, as I've said many times, that transferring your consciousness after death is how it's done when you die. That consciousness does not live in the physical body. Consciousness lives in your divine blueprint. And the divine blueprint is multidimensional. So consciousness has the ability to move up and down frequencies of consciousness, frequencies of thought, frequencies of reality, of density. So I call it density or frequency. And predominantly while you're living, consciousness is dwelling in what's called the astral body, which is the body closest to your physical body. And while you have a portion of your consciousness working the physical body, it works the physical body through, the autonomic nervous system, but the nervous system, the brain, the DNA, your chakras. It is primarily the larger part of it is primarily dwelling in your astral body. And so when you astral travel and you dream, and when you die, you go into your astral body, into what is known as the astral worlds or purgatory worlds. Almost all people on the earth go to the astral plane. This is where everybody goes. And this is not a situation that has no other options. There are other options. It's just our belief systems have so encapsulated us here on this one timeline, one earth, one body. We don't explore higher dimensions, higher consciousness. We don't know how to expand our consciousness and live in higher densities and live with higher frequencies of life forms and other extraterrestrials. So one of the examples of transferring your consciousness or bilocation I want to talk about is when I go to visit this specific spaceship of some extraterrestrials. When I go there, I go in my astral body, and there is like a pad. I go into the ship, and there's like this pad that I stand on, and it's similar to like in Star Trek Voyager 7 of 9. She would get into this rejuvenation kind of chamber. This is a chamber. It's only 2/3 of the way around. There's an opening, and you stand on this pad, and this chamber is activated, and my astral body, which is kind of hovering, immediately it's like wearing gravity boots, suddenly just boom, anchors onto the pad, solid, and then the machine solidifies my astral body into a solid physical form. Then I step off the pad, and I'm as solid and physical as everybody else on the ship, on the spaceship. Then I have gone to this lab where I've gone on a number of occasions, and they're working on all kinds of ideas, some with terraforming, you might say, or working with creating planets or forming what kind of life is on a planet. And they have this technology where they can create an idea on their pad. I'm just going to use the word kind of like an iPad. It's not quite like that, but if they create something on their iPad, let's say, I'm going to just make it simple. Let's say they're drawing a chair on their iPad. They can project that out into like a holographic image. Now you're looking at the chair in a holographic image, but with more technology that they use, they solidify the chair. Now the chair is in physical form. You can sit on that chair. So these extraterrestrials know how to solidify form. This is easy technology for them. And it's like the holodeck again in Star Trek. When you went in there, all those characters and every bit of the houses and the streets and everything that you saw there was solid. So this goes back to my constantly saying that bodies are abundant in the universe, and it's consciousness that is the most important thing, and that consciousness is easily transferred from one body to another, and it can easily solidify in whatever density or dimension you're working in. So when I'm done with my work there on the ship, I go back to that pad, and someone assists me when I'm coming in, but when I leave, I know how to use the equipment. So I plug in the program, and when I press this kind of like a start button, immediately that sense of gravity is released, and the body, the solid body is dropped, and I float up off the pad in my astral body again, and I can then come back into my physical body. So that time that I am on the ship in a solid physical body working on the ship, you could call that a bilocation, because part of me is still anchored in my physical body back at the house, either meditating or in a bed sleeping. And then another larger majority of myself is working in another physical body in another reality, or just in a spaceship, or possibly higher frequencies or densities. This is very common in the extraterrestrial worlds. And so the other thing I want to say is that because of our belief systems, we are so addicted to and anchored to this physical body and this physical reality and this physical earth. We have these belief systems that we only have one body, and we have these belief systems that we're going to either keep this body in some sort of resurrection, or we're going to use this body, our same identity, maybe in some kind of heaven idea. But all these belief systems that we've had, we've been unable to expand our consciousness and grow into higher densities and realities in our body that we have now. Our brains need to be reorganized. Our belief systems have to be reorganized. Our chakras have to be reorganized. This is why I teach the sacred fire so adamantly, because it not only cleanses out everything, it begins to reorganize your brain patterns, and you begin to expand your consciousness so that you can start to accept other types of reality. Because if you do not begin to expand consciousness and experience other kinds of reality, the only reality you have is at the moment of death, there's like a snapshot that's taken of you, of your brain, your spinal column, your chakras, your entire energy system. And that snapshot is all that you accomplished with your consciousness. And if only thing you ever accomplished with your consciousness is all your fears and desires and attachments to your body and the earth, then you're going into the astral body, because the astral body is a mirror image of the earth body. That's the only place you can go, because you don't have any other awareness. You haven't done any work spiritually to gain access anywhere else. So you go to the astral worlds. And so in the astral worlds, there's many, many different levels there. There's very hellish places. There's sort of a medium area where everybody is pretty much living just like they lived on Earth, and that's pretty much the majority. I've been over there to see a lot of my dead relatives. I recently, 2 days ago, visited a friend, a very good friend of mine who passed a couple of years ago. I went to see her, and she recognized me immediately. And we talked about the fact that she wasn't dead. She never died. She isn't, she didn't have this concept of death, because I told her I missed her since she passed, and she laughed at me and said, I didn't die. I didn't die. And I'm right here. And we would talk and stuff. And so they don't go through, many of them don't even go through any concept of that they died. They just literally move into their astral body and continue their life like they always did. She was a great host, and she sponsored a number of my workshops when I was teaching and traveling. And so this is part of the astral worlds. Excuse me. There are also parts of the astral worlds that are higher frequencies, that have become more connected to their consciousness in a more transformative way. You might say these would be saints, like Saint Teresa or Saint Catherine, Saint Francis, people like that. And they have the potential to move into higher densities and be more expanded beings of light. But sometimes these great beings could be yogis too, depending on their belief systems and what they've made contact with through their meditation practice. If they've lived under a very rigid belief system like Catholicism, and you didn't want to branch out like St. Teresa, she was always conscious of staying within the church dogma because she didn't want to get burned at the stake. So if you are consciously staying within a dogma, you would go into these higher realms in the astral world, which would be like very heavenly. They're much finer vibrations. And there are angels, they would understand them as angels, not extraterrestrials in those days, but they're also multidimensional beings that they would be able to comprehend that, because in their physical body on earth, they were communing with Mary or Jesus or the angels, and a lot of saints had attacks by demons. I mean, most people who are any multidimensional at all have all kinds of dark force issues. So their brain patterns had been set up for other spiritual entities. So when they're in the astral worlds, they're able to accept those other spiritual entities as not themselves, where most everybody, when they pass in the astral and they're living their life like they used to, they're not going to be in contact with beings that would be considered angelic, extraterrestrial, because if it's not in their pattern of understanding, they may have heard about angels, they may even know about Jesus, but the thing is that the frequency of Jesus is not in that vibration, and they're generally just connecting to their old life. The frequency of Jesus is a higher dimension. So the saints and beings who have had contact with other beings, they are capable of comprehending that. So they grow from the higher astral realm into other densities by transferring their consciousness into new bodies. And to do that, you have to let go primarily of the memory and attachment to your identity in this body. So when you transfer your consciousness, unless you're transferring it into a clone, you would be transferring after death into a different kind of body. For instance, the body might be you're not going to be radically different, because those who are working on expanding consciousness, and I have many videos on my trips into higher dimensions, we're not transferring our consciousness in out-of-body experiences into some kind of, weird-looking spider form, because we're not connecting. My patterns cannot connect to living in an insectoid body. But my patterns can connect to an expanded or slightly altered version of the head, eyes, arms, legs, humanoid type look. So my transferring into bodies where they're bald and they have blue skin. Their skin is blue, their heads are totally bald, their eyes are much bigger. Those bodies for me have been familiar. I can move in and out of those kind of bodies. I can move into bodies that are very tall, really tall beings. Their heads are different. So those are some that I'm capable of doing, and I'm altering the brain patterns, and I am altering and adjusting my chakras and my system, my energy system, so that when it's time for me to pass over and leave this body behind, that snapshot is going to show a consciousness that has access to other frequencies and other realities. So now your divine blueprint has more options. You don't have to stay anchored to the earth in an astral world, living an old body that you are going to live in for another 1,000 years. You can actually, now you have options. So you can go and transfer your consciousness into one of those bodies that you had been experiencing while you were still here on earth. You were transferring your consciousness in dream plane. You would leave your body, and sometimes you would go from your astral body to those higher bodies, or sometimes you would, when you fall asleep in astral travel, you would bilocate directly bypass the astral, so to speak, bilocate directly into those bodies. So what I'm doing with my group, my Patreon group this month, we have an exercise of everybody doing a daydreaming exercise where they are imagining their next body, their next reality, their next life that they're living in. And the exercises I give in my private group, my Patreon group, and please come and join if you want. These exercises, everything I do in that group is designed to help people begin to expand their consciousness, become aware that they're multidimensional, protect themselves from the astral and fourth density worlds, which are the ones that want to keep us trapped here, and begin to create a new understanding of who you are. And it's true that these generations, my generation and below me right now and above me, may not get this. So a lot of this is for future generations, but we're starting now, and there are people who are being able to understand that when you transfer your consciousness, you can go to other bodies, and those bodies can be in other realities. And so that's my discussion for today, friends, and I will see you in the next video.